personally, again, my lens is always through the regulatory lawyer. If I was sitting on the FDA panel and I heard all the beautiful benefits of social media and, oh, this is terrific, and oh, there's a chilling effect, my first instantaneous question, how do I deal with this? And the accountability question is critical. And I'm really glad to hear several presentations today of people stepping up to the plate and saying, we want to be held accountable. We want to be regulated. There are limits, obviously, about whether the information is controlled or if we have a sphere of influence. But I found three really interesting ways of looking at this accountability issue. Ruiz's presentation on the 3 C's, I think, is a home run, because the FDA can use that criteria of creation, collaboration, and compensation, put that in regulatory legal language, and that defines control or sponsorship. That is, in fact, when the FTC issued its guides a couple of months ago, and they basically said, brands, advertisers, you are liable. You have to take responsibility for your bloggers or your speakers, even though you lose control over it, even though you hire an agency to hire the agents for you, you're responsible for the, quote, sponsored advertising. So it's that sponsorship, and I think the 3 C's is a great way to codify from a regulatory perspective what the expectations are from the agency. I wouldn't be surprised to see those 3 C's actually in the regs, because that defines control, that defines influence. The other, and this was a different way of doing it, J&J's presentation, instead of defining the regulatory perspective, they asked the question, we'll be responsible, but you've got to consider who is saying it, what's the product, who's the audience, and what are the technical limitations, like Twitter. So again, those are regulatory things that the FDA is going to have to fool around with to come out with some regulations. But I think with those 2 frameworks, with the 3 C's and with the questions, the factors J&J was providing, I think the FDA has all the regulatory tools it needs to give us some guidance. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum was the flap about sidewalking. That's just something the companies don't have any control over, and boy, is it providing heartburn to the pharma companies, obviously. So they could come out very quickly and say an environment like SideWiki is something that totally the brands don't have any control over. Wouldn't we love that kind of a rule in the media? Okay. Next thing was about monitoring. And this is something I'm working through with clients right now on the FTC side. If we've got all these speakers making comments about my products and services, how the heck do we monitor our sponsored speakers? Sometimes it's easy, but sometimes when you get into the user-generated content world, at what point do you have to stop monitoring? You heard that again and again and again. We can't be responsible for monitoring the whole darn internet. What do we do? I thought a really interesting presentation was when there was like the concentric circles and the sphere of influence. So I could see where, you have the corporate control context, like the website. Then you have sponsored advertising on the 3rd site. Then you have the company provided information on a general disease site. And so you're just working your way out until finally you get third-party communications, which they shouldn't have the responsibility for monitoring. So again, I think the FDA has the regulatory tools to get their arms around it. They're not going to give us black and white rules. They can't. One size never fits all. So when these people sit down and start working through what guidance they're going to give us, it's like, clear and conspicuous, meaningful and adequate disclosures. Well, what does that mean? Well, it depends. Welcome to my world. But that's the kinds of things regulators deal with, and they want to give you all the freedom, the discretion to kind of work with it. So they've got the tools right now. I'm saying on the basis, if you're just from an evidentiary perspective, do we have the record before us to do this, to get the mission accomplished? After day one, they do. Disclosure. I think we really heard today that if the company, if the brand sponsors, it has influence over a third-party site, that needs to be disclosed. So as a consumer, I know, oh, Pfizer is, providing this site. So therefore, I as a consumer, I might look at that a bit differently if I know Pfizer's trying to sell one of their products. And that's exactly the same principles that the FTC was issuing when they were saying, you've got to disclose material connections. And I expect the FDA to do the same thing. Consideration, that is, if any of these sites are getting funding, whether it's money, free prizes, junkets to Hawaii, whatever it is, that needs to be disclosed because it's going to impact the consumer's weight that they give to that information. And second, any relationships. If the third site, the owner of that site's on the board of directors, for example, that needs to be disclosed. But that's pretty easy. They could do that.